thank you for joining me. We have a beautiful painting for you today. It's a dock scene taken from St. Augustine, Florida. In fact, that's the title of our painting. Let's just go right to the palette and get started. First thing we're going to do is put out 2 puddles of white paint, Snow White. And as you'll notice, we're using the liquid acrylic. Again, we're going to use this through the whole series. Okay, to 1 puddle we want to add Georgia clay, which is sort of an orange. It's going to give us sort of an orange cast. The other we're going to add True Blue. All right, let me get out a little more white so I won't have to keep going back to the paints. Okay, now first thing we want to do, we're going to cover the entire canvas. So I'm going to wet it. And for that I'm using a fan brush, and the reason I'm using the fan brush is because covering a large area, so there's no point in using a little small brush and little bitty, being persnickety, little bitty strokes, covering a little bit of area at a time. Just go ahead and get it all coated. This takes just a minute, but it saves us a lot of time in the long run. Now, if you're working at home, you wouldn't have to do this. But my time is limited here, so I'm trying to save a few minutes here and there to show you all I can with the time that we have allotted. So that's the reason I'm just using a few little tricks that you wouldn't have to use at home when you're painting in the privacy of your own home. Okay, now the white and the Georgia clay, we want a soft peach color. Let me give you one other tip before we get started too. Back to the palette again. We're going to give the paints a little spritz of water. That just keeps them workable longer. Acrylics dry real fast, and that's one of the beauty parts of acrylics. Okay, back to the canvas. If you have a little bit too much water, you can see it kind of running, so you want to blot it just a little bit. We're going to cover this whole area right in here with this color. Skim right over your buildings. Now I have a little, sort of a little drawing to help me find my lines in a hurry. We have a lot of buildings in this painting, so what we're doing is I'm very gently skimming over the buildings. If you're watching closely, you can see that I'm not putting as much pressure on my brush over the buildings and around the boats as I am up in the sky area. That way, so much paint won't come off of my brush. It's just kind of coats it a little bit so that once we finish the painting, we won't have any white teeth of the canvas showing. I know you've seen paintings like that where you saw a little bit of white here and a little patch of white there, like the artist. Well, they were afraid they were going to mess it up around the building, so they just left a little white, what we call a ghost. Well, we try to avoid that by skimming over your lines very lightly. Okay, now we're going to finish up the sky. Then we're going to jump down to the water, down in here. Paint the same color. That is your white and your True Blue. Okay, light strokes here. Soft pressure on your brush. Light over the dock. There's going to be a beautiful old dock over in here. And light pressure on the brush over in here. Okay, we are in business. While the sky is drying just a little bit before I lay the cloud in, this is a dock here that's an old broken, kind of decayed. So what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to darken the water under the dock, wouldn't we? It's not a reflection, this is a shadow. This is where the sun is blocked. So for that I'm adding a little bit of Ebony Black to the True Blue. Light pressure on the brush. I can still see my lines through it, through the paint. Okay, now remember I said that's not a reflection. That is a shadow. Where the sun is blocked, the light's blocked here completely. Okay, while this water is wet, let's add a few reflections. There's going to be a boat sitting here, so we might as well just go ahead and get the reflections in while we're working in that, waiting on this area to dry a little bit. Let's use dark chocolate, little bit of ebony black. Pull your reflection down. You don't want it too dark. Okay, there's another dark over in here. Let's go ahead and add our reflection here. Light strokes on the brush. Now I can still see the tracing through it. You might get tired of hearing that, but if you put heavy pressure on the brush, all of this paint's going to come off on the canvas, and you're going to lose your lines. And that's okay if you want to reestablish them yourself. If you want to make your painting easy, save them. Okay, now I'm going to wipe the brush, blend those in just a little bit. Now here again we use light pressure. If I put heavy pressure, what's going to happen? All of that dark paint would mix with the light paint underneath, and we'd just lose every bit of it. We'd end up with just a softer, darker blue. Okay, while the water's still wet, I'm going to add a few dark, sort of ripples in the water down in here. This is the Ebony Black True Blue mixture. Give the water just a little bit of movement. We're in good shape. Okay, let's see, water here. We need a little bit of water right through here. Just pretend the boat's and the shack's not even there, and pick up your water on the other side, just like you were drawing straight through it. All right, now let's see if we can go back to the sky now and lay a cloud in. White, Georgia clay, a little bit lighter than the horizon mixture. Dry your brush. Get a clean paper towel. And blend at an angle or crisscross, diagonal or crisscross, whichever, which is the same thing. Blend downward into the wet blue. And notice that I put these, I laid both clouds in at an angle also. Nothing, all of these lines down in here are horizontal. So if we had horizontal clouds, the painting would take on a symmetrical look, a balanced look, and you always want to try to keep everything a little bit off balance for interest. It would have been just too stiff looking. Okay, a little bit of blending downward now. Get some of the strokes out of the sky. I think we're in good shape here. If you want to, now this is not necessary evil, but if you want to emphasize your clouds, you would just darken. Take a soft brush. This is a 1/2-inch Crooker, and just pick a few spots to sort of darken the sky behind the cloud. See how that pushes your cloud forward? Just a little bit of a shadow back in there. Okay, now this area this is a building right in here. It's an old fishing shack, or whatever you want to call these things. This area right in here is wet, so I'm going to start on the building part of it, not the roof. For that, I'm going to use Georgia clay, Snow White, add a little bit of dark chocolate to the mixture. I want to stay away from wet paint as much as I can, because in acrylics, wet paint will bleed into wet paint. So what we do is we let one area dry unless we want to do a little blending. And then you would want your paint to stay wet. But if you're going to, if you don't want it to bleed or to blend, then you're going to need to let it dry just a little bit. Okay, let's lay the dock in while we're working in that area. Dark chocolate, white, little bit of ebony black. Might as well get the post in while we're at it. These on the back side. Now I'll go to a smaller brush. Let it do my work for me. Okay, these are on the front side. They'd be a little bit wider, and they would come all the way across the dot. Back side again would pick up the bottom of the post. We are in good shape here. Pull your reflections all the way down in your water. All right, let's start working on the boat just a little bit. Now, I'm not finished with these. I need to soften those reflections down just a little bit, but I give it just a little bit of drying time. The boat's sort of a dirty white. What would we use for that? White, dark chocolate, ebony black. Bet you can start to see it taking shape now. Okay, the back of it's going to be a little bit lighter, so we'll add a little bit more white to it, to the mixture. Bottom's going to be a little bit darker, so let's add some dark chocolate. Put a little shadow under the trim on the boat. Now let's put a little trim on the boat where we put the shadow. Now let's put the cabin on the boat. Still the same mixtures. When I switch over, I'll remember to tell you. Okay, let's lay the nets in there. Georgia clay, Snow White. Yeah, we're not working against any wet paint there, so we're in good shape. Okay, the shadowed side, let's just add dark chocolate and blend. A lot of work on this painting, isn't it? But it surely is a pretty thing once it's finished. This is a real place in St. Augustine. We took a photograph of it on a trip when we were there. And I liked it so well, I just had to paint it. Just didn't have a choice. All right, let's see if we can get the cabin, the roof on the cabin now. The door to go in and out, the windows, shadow. Now the shadow is just a darker mixture of the cabin mixture. Let's soften that just a little bit. And we can do some tidying up once we get all of these shapes laid in. Okay, let's go to a bigger brush now and lay in the underpainting for this big building here. Now this is going to be a wash. And the reason I waited on this is because this area was wet out in here. And I didn't want this paint to bleed out into the sky, which it would do. Now, you know what a wash is. A wash is so thin that you can actually see through your paint. Let's get the underpainting for the dock. Okay, while that's wet, I think I'll get these decayed areas just laid in here. give it the old look. Maybe break up a few of these boards over in here with some dark. Little bit of dark pigment. Don't you run down there. Make it look old and worn, used. Now, I can't put the windows in right now because the painting is too wet and they would just bleed out this way, but I can lay the shadow for the roof in because I don't care if it bleeds downward. In fact, if it does, it would be awfully pretty. There's a post that goes right here. Let's just lay that in. Post here. One there. Oh, and that boat looks like it's almost sitting up on top of that. Well, we can't have that. Let's pull it down. Put the post in front of it. Okay. I think we're dry enough to get the roof in. Now let's use Georgia clay. Georgia clay, dark chocolate. Okay, for those of y'all who've been watching me do the oils, you know what I did there. But the acrylics are so exciting, especially liquid acrylics, that I have just fallen completely in love with them. Just completely in love with them. They're so much fun to work with, and they're so inexpensive. I'm telling you, that's exciting. We had so many people ask us about, they want to get started painting, but they feel like they just can't afford a big investment, especially until they know whether they're going to like it or not. So we've come up with this that almost anybody can afford. And they're non-toxic too. That's another great feature. Okay, let's see if we can get our doorway in now. I believe we can. Don't run, don't run, don't run. Okay, let's tighten it up just a little bit now. At the same time, we're lightening the front of the building just a little bit. Okay, Georgia clay. Let's use some antique gold with the Georgia clay and get some highlights now. Georgia clay, antique gold, snow white. I'm going to have to put my finger, lay my finger in my water. We're going to use that same mixture for every one of them. And notice that I'm just kind of patting it on. Not doing any blending there yet, because if I smooth it out, it's going to make it look new. And we don't want it to look new. I told you not to run. That area was just a little wet while I was working in it, and the paint's running, but we can fix that. Okay, let's anchor our post now into the water. All right, let's see if we can get a little bit deeper shadow here and then. I may not have time to put those windows in. That doesn't look like that area is drying. If we can, we will. But that's no big deal. Wouldn't want it to run. Wouldn't want the paint to run. It still looks a little bit wet there. There, we got that. And I knew we could. Okay, let's go with some highlights in the water. White, antique gold, a little bit of Georgia clay. What kind of strokes am I using? Little downward curves. A little bit lighter now around the boat. A little bit lighter out in here. Now some angles. Make the water move just a little bit. Let me take off a tad of that white there. Make the water move just a little bit. Well, we're looking real good here. I'm going to straighten up this door just a little bit. It was driving me crazy. Now this white breaks up the monotony of the water, and it also gives you a little bit of movement in the water. Need a few darker squiggles. Few darker lines in the water also, especially down in your foreground area. If you get your water darker here, it pushes all of this area backwards. Okay, let's start on a little bit of the rigging. Script liner, Ebony Black, dark chocolate. And a little bit here, let's see. We're going to give it a try. Let me wipe it down just a little bit. Still a little wet in this sky area, but I do want to show you how to lay this rigging in. Just wouldn't be a shrimp boat without it, would it? No, it wouldn't. Tell you something else we have to have. We have no choice. We got to have a bird or two, don't we? Might even get that window added in. I believe we can. Looks like it's drying beautifully. You have to have your birds now. For the birds, I used the same mixture that I used for the dock. I just added a little blue and a little white. Might want to put a lot of little mustache birds back over in here, in your horizon area. They would be sitting all over the place. Let's perch one up here on the... Oh, he looks so good. Let's perch two up there. Let's give him some light wings and heads. Okay, let's go for the shadow underneath the dock area of the shack. And soften downward. As soon as I move my hand, you can see what I've done. See, down, 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 down. Okay, let's lay the windows in there. Aren't you glad we did that? I couldn't have slept tonight if we hadn't gotten to do that. See, it worked with it dried just enough to get them in there. Now let's put a few panes in there. Add a few cross pieces. Okay, to show that these are windows, let's darken the corners just a little bit. Can you see that that actually gives you the effect of looking inside of the window? We do the same thing on the door here. You darken the side, and let's do the same thing on the cabin door. How about the cabin windows? Maybe darken the shadow here a little bit. Okay, let's have a look at it and see if we like it, and I think we do. I think that's all the time we have for today. I'll see you next time. Thank you.